friends, and comrades. I wish to thank all of you here for coming to attend this book launch of my historical memoir, Living in a Time of Deception. When F8 undertook to organize this launch, it did not envision the many difficulties it would encounter in securing a venue for this launch. F8 first tried to book the Medical Alumni Auditorium in Utrecht, that is at the General Hospital. After all, I am a doctor and a local graduate, and therefore I am technically an old boy of the medical alumni. Moreover, my first book, The Fajar Generation, was launched there in 2009. I wonder what had changed since 2009 for the medical alumni to take such a discourteous attitude towards a fellow old boy. The Singapore Medical Association, SMA, a separate organization which looks after the professional and ethical interests of the medical profession in Singapore, was then approached to help in securing the venue. Its members were very supportive and tried to book the Alumni Hall in their name but for our use. This was also rejected by the medical alumni who owns the hall, who owns the premises. I want to thank the Singapore Medical Association for its support. Interestingly, if I may add, I am a founder member of the Singapore Medical Association and its first Secretary General. And allow me to pay homage to SMA's founding president, Dr. B.R. Srinivasan, who became the first local vice-chancellor of the university from 1962 to 1963. Dr. Srinivasan was a man of principle. When he was the vice-chancellor of the university, he refused to enforce the suitability certificate of political screening for students entering the university. He believed that the university, as an educational institute, should not be involved in such matters. If the applicants meet the required academic standard for entrance, he should be admitted. Dr. Srinivasan lost his job. I saw him while he was very ill. He had no regrets. He was made of sterner stuff. When F8 then decided to book the Tan Kah Kee Auditorium, owned by the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Hill Street. After the rejection by the medical alumni, what venue would be more befitting for this book launch than the Tan Kah Kee Auditorium? For I am, after all, Tan Kah Kee's grandson. The hall was available on 20th February, and F8 proceeded to pay the deposit of $500 to reserve it. The Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry advertises that it has avenues for public to rent for their functions. However, in less than a week, the Council of the Singapore Chinese Chamber of Commerce and Industry informed Poh Soo Kai of F8 that it had decided to cancel the reservation. No reason for the rejection was forthcoming. It is sad to note that I, a grandson, cannot make use of a hall that is in my grandfather's name to launch my memoirs, which pays homage to the old man. To me, this is a sign of a very sick society. In any case, we are gathered here today to launch the book, Living in the Time of Deception. Now, I would like to talk about my book. It is termed a historical memoir. It is thus deals not only with my life, but more importantly, my life in the context of the historical developments in Singapore as I lived through them. History, to me, is a subject that is based on facts. One may have different interpretations of the facts, and one can argue over the interpretations, but the facts must be there. In my memoir, we have taken great pains to verify the facts from the British archives, the Singapore Hansard, and other sources. History is not a tale that can be fabricated or conjured out of thin air. A Singapore story cannot masquerade as the history of Singapore. I want to give you just two examples of such fabrications or tales passing off as historical facts. One, the Parramatta beat the police event in October 1956, fabricated to justify the imprisonment of Lim Chin Siong. Dennis Bloodworth, a writer commissioned by the PAP to write Singapore story, was happy to regurgitate the PAP version that Lim Chin Siong had called upon those attending the PAP rally at Beauty World in October 1956 to Pa Mata, that is, beat up the police. Bloodworth had access to the Singapore police files that recorded the event and therefore knew this to be false. His bibliography states sources from the Security Department, page 146 of his book is on the Beauty World speech. Moreover, he also had interviewed Lim Chin Siong for his book. Chin Siong would definitely have denied making such an inflammatory statement as Pa Mata as he did when interviewed and recorded by Melanie Chiu in her book, Leaders of Singapore. Today, some 60 years later, thanks to historian P.J. Thum, painstaking research, we now have concrete evidence, concrete proof from the police files in the British archives that Chin Siong categorically did not call on the crowd to Pa Mata. There can absolutely be no mistake that he said the contrary, which is my Pa Mata, which is to not beat the police, as Chin Siong followed this phrase up by telling the rally in Beauty World that the police were wage earners, like those attending the rally, and therefore welcome in their midst. There can be no mistake in what Chin Siong was telling them. Yet, for some 60 years, this Pa Mata fabrication has been treated as historical truth in the Singapore storytelling. Bloodworth's book, published in 1986, was named as one of the recommended history books by the authorities for the Singapore schools. If a person as well known and popular as Lim Chin Siong, by that time also an elected assemblyman of the Singapore legislature, could be fixed up in this manner, one shudders to think the fate of the thousands of students and trade union activists whisked off into arbitrary imprisonment without trial. The Internal Security Act, which legitimizes their arrest, has no place in any society upholding human rights. The other example of creating a story from thin air is my visit with Grace, then my wife, and G. Raman to Masai in South Johor to treat an injured bomber. We were supposed to have driven across 2 immigration checkpoints, the Singapore checkpoint, the Malaysian checkpoint, to South Johor. The cars were supposed to be following one another. And we went there stealthily in the middle of the night. Evidence from the immigration records could easily have proven whether we did go or we did not. The evidence was never produced, but Grace was arrested and imprisoned. This fabrication, propagated on the front page headlines and in vivid details, was swallowed hook, bait, and all by everyone. Many years later, a young friend of mine told me that his doctor wife supported my right as a doctor to treat an injured person anywhere. And so convinced was she that that the event had actually happened and that I had gone to Maasai. She maintained that she reiterated that it was my duty as a doctor to do so. So coming back to my historical memoir, I would welcome criticisms of what I write if it were based on facts and with evidence. Lastly, there is one more matter that is heavy in my heart and spirit that I should take this opportunity to say a few words. We all, that is the older generation, have lived through a very dark period of fear, uncertainty, a dilemma, and downright frustration that followed on the heels of the mass arrest of leaders of the Barisan Socialists in February 1963 and in September 1963. How could we, who have abided by peaceful and constitutional means, be dealt such a violent blow as detention without trial, to be plucked with force by armed police from our families and loved ones in the still of night, and denied due process of law that is enshrined in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Yet, in the very dark depth of 1963, a group of young men and women, mainly from Nanta, bravely rose up to fill the vacuum in the Barisan leadership created by the mass imprisonment. In touch with the concrete situation on the ground, in particular, the difficulties at that time to organize the progressive forces as experienced by the left-wing trade unions. In tune with the ground, they advocated taking a less robust stand in opposition. This would appear prudent at the time when the Barisan was already crippled and decimated. On the other hand, however, a series of unconstitutional arrests exacerbated by further anti-democratic policies and actions on the part of the ruling power, such as the refusal to call Parliament into session to discuss merger, created deep frustration and provoked intemperate responses in certain quarters of the Barisan, resulting in a subjective urge to take a robust stand as opposition and even to reject parliamentary democracy. Dr. Lee Siew Chow, chairman of the Barisan Socialists, headed this stand. And so it came to pass that the clash became inevitable between Dr. Lee and the Nanta group. To the point that Dr. Lee resigned from the Barisan Socialists. The Nanta group finally managed to get him to return for the sake of left-wing unity. The Nanta group fell in line with Dr. Lee. However, out in the cold were the left-wing trade unions who refused to take a robust stand in opposition. An example would be Supaye, one of the unions. Hence, they came to be on the receiving end of harsh criticisms for those towing the party line. A rift developed between members of the Nanta group and the left-wing trade unions that have unfortunately persisted till today. I say this with a heavy heart, for given a correct analysis, it is a contradiction among comrades and should not have been pushed to the precipice of no return, gravely bruising personal feelings and sentiments. Today, it would seem that there is remorse and political withdrawal from those among us who had gone on the offensive to attack the left-wing unions, especially since Dr. Lee had subsequently acknowledged and apologized for the policy of robust opposition. On the other hand, it would seem that persistence still remains to call the Nanta group to account in the twilight of our lives, or we would have abandoned the stage to its present occupants, who most gleefully welcome our absence, which they have engineered, notably with Operation Cold Storm. Therefore, to my comrades in arms, let me end this speech by quoting from Paul A. Barak, who said in 1931, in The Looming Spectre of Hitler, and if the tribulations of the political humdrum and the disappointments of our last decades have caused many of you to desire some political tranquility, to desire a vacation from politics. You must repress this attack of weakness with all your might. This desertion from political battleground is the greatest crime against humanity that one can commit. Occasion that one can commit because the others, the reactionary, backward, striving forces, never allow themselves a vacation from politics. If you, infuriated and embittered, now renounce the political struggle, if you sulkily stand off to the side with a dismissive wave of your hand, then you leave the politics to the others. Then you subject yourself to their domination. Take no vacation from politics. Otherwise, the meaning of your existence will leave you. With these words, Paul A. Baran, I close my speech on my historical memoir, Living at a Time of Deception. Thank you.